And speaking of hit jobs, China is at it again, mounting a new challenge to India's sovereignty. It began with the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It goes through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. It's a clear violation of India's sovereignty. But China sees no problem with it. In 2020, China announced a power project in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and now it is targeting Aksai Chin. China wants to build a railway line through India's Aksai Chin. This is the region we're talking about. It's Indian territory. China illegally occupied it during the 1962 war, and now it wants to consolidate its hold by building a railway line. It will connect Xinjiang to Tibet, and it will cut through Aksai Chin. As always, the Chinese paint this as a civilian project, but if you know anything about Chinese projects, you know that they always serve more than one purpose. This one, the railway line, has a distinct military purpose. The PLA, the People's Liberation Army, can use it to mobilize quickly, especially along the border with India. And New Delhi has a reason to be worried. Let me explain how this works. Tibet is at the center of this plan. China is building a massive railway network here. Currently, it is 1,400 kilometers long. The new plan is to expand this to 4,000. What for? To integrate remote areas, to cut travel time, and of course, to enable swift military mobilization. The Xinjiang-Tibet railway line is part of the larger project. Here is the proposed route. It begins in Shigatse in Tibet. The final stop is Hotan in Xinjiang. And here is the part that New Delhi should worry about in particular. The planned route passes through two border areas, the Pangong Lake on the Chinese side, which is also the center of the current standoff, and Rutog County. Again, this is close to the LAC, the line of actual control. Reports say the PLA has frontier bases here. So those were the two planned stops. How quickly can China build this? The construction plan has been split into two phases. Phase 1 will be completed by 2025, that's 2 years from now, and Phase 2 will be finished by 2035. When will the railway line reach Aksai Chin? 2025, that's what the Chinese media claims. They're calling it the Shigatse Pakutokso section, the part that would run through Aksai Chin. Let me quote from a Chinese mouthpiece. This is what they say. By 2025, the construction of several railway projects, including the Yan Ningchi section of the Sichuan-Tibet Railway, the Shigatse Paktukso section of the Xinjiang-Tibet Railway, and the Bomi-Rauk section of the Yunnan-Tibet Railway will all see major progress according to the plan. This is what they're saying, major progress. That's for the Aksai Chin section. So the plan is to build quickly. And this should be problematic, not just for India, but also Nepal, because China is targeting Nepal too. The new railway routes will run up to China's borders with Nepal. Under this plan, Girong will get a railway line. This is a land port. It falls on the Nepal-Tibet border. So expect the Chinese to show up there. In fact, China has been rapidly expanding its border infrastructure. In 2021, Tibet got its first bullet train. It linked Lhasa to Ningchi. That's near the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. The railway line is barely 16 kilometers from the de facto border. Why is that a reason to worry? Because China claims the entire state of Arunachal Pradesh as its own territory. They call it South Tibet. There is no merit to China's claims. But then again, merit is the last thing that the Chinese care about. In 2021, Xi Jinping paid a visit to Tibet. It was the first visit by a Chinese president in 30 years. Do you know what he chose to highlight there? The bullet train project. The Chinese president even took a ride on the bullet train. The message was quite clear. China will continue to press with its territorial claims and build infrastructure to secure its hold. What is India's response? New Delhi is responding in kind, ramping up its own border infrastructure. India's strategy has two parts. Number one, building infra on the Indian side. The focus is on all states and union territories that share a border with China, the likes of Ladakh, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh. India is keen on improving connectivity to remote areas. More roads are being built. In fact, I have some data. From 2014 to 2022, India launched a massive construction spree. Over 6,000-kilometer long roads were built. Compare that to the previous years. Between 2008 and 2014, India built just over 3,000-kilometer long roads. So the pace of construction has doubled. That's part one of India's strategy. part 2 involves India's immediate neighborhood. I'm talking about countries like Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal and Myanmar. India is investing heavily in these countries. It is funding connectivity projects, and dozens of them, like railway lines that connect Nepal to Bangladesh. And the Sitwe port project, it connects Myanmar to India's Mizoram. How will these investments help? China wants to expand its influence in South Asia. It wants to build more ports and highways. This will pile debt on India's neighbors and create security challenges for New Delhi. So India is working overtime to neutralize China's design, and it won't be easy. Because we hope to match in a few years what China has been doing for decades. While they're building or looking to build a railway line through Tibet, we are still working on Mumbai-Delhi connectivity. I know there's no comparison, but it tells you how India is making up for deficits of the past while trying to meet the challenges of the future. Meanwhile, back in China, they have a visitor, the President of Iran. He is there for a 3-day visit starting today. His name is Ebrahim Raisi. With him are his cabinet ministers. Raisi was reportedly sent a personal invite by Chinese President Xi Jinping. He has a host of meetings lined up, including talks with Xi and Chinese business delegations. Reports say Tehran hopes to sign deals worth $10 billion with China. What kind of deals? Railways, dams, power plants. Also on the agenda is the Iran nuclear deal, the one that the Americans junked under Donald Trump in 2018. Biden is trying to revive it, but it looks like a dead horse. Negotiations are stalled, which makes China's outreach to Iran all the more interesting and significant. Raisi's visit is the first by an Iranian president in nearly 2 decades, the first to China in 2 decades. Tehran attaches great importance to it.
From a political point of view, President Raisi's visit to China is of great importance and special significance. It shows the relations between the two countries continue to develop in a favorable political environment. The visit will reflect the political will of the leaders of the two countries on issues such as expanding bilateral relations and safeguarding common interests.
Ebrahim Raisi's visit comes as China and Iran are increasingly finding common ground. Not quite natural allies, but allies nonetheless. China has big ambitions in West Asia. Tehran is a vital cog in that plan, and it works for Iran too. Raisi has a lot on his plate at the moment. His country's nuclear program is under scrutiny. It is at odds with the Arab world, and the economy is down in the dumps. Tehran desperately needs money from the Chinese. Remember, the two countries signed a deal in 2021, Iran and China, 25-year-long, $400 billion deal. Beijing promised more investments in Tehran across sectors, ports, railways, banking, you name it. All of this was in exchange for Iran's oil. So it's a win-win partnership, except for the tiny detail about China's money coming with major strings and a potential debt trap. But here's one more thing that works for them. They have a common enemy in the United States. In fact, this has become a major point of convergence. A slew of US sanctions have brought Iran and China closer than ever before. In fact, let me quote from what Ebrahim Raisi said ahead of his visit. Iran and China believe that unilateralism and violent measures such as the imposition of unjust sanctions are the main source of a world fraught with crises and insecurity. Both China and Iran are unanimous in stressing that all countries should work together to achieve true multilateralism, international justice, and a just international order in the world. So what do the growing China-Iran ties mean for the world, for the United States, and for countries like India that have trade, cultural, and strategic ties with Iran, not to mention the Chabahar port? They'll have to play very safely, make their moves carefully. Because at the moment, China seems to be the best bet for Iran. China continues to be Iran's largest trading partner. As per the last data available, total trade between the two sides stood at around $25 billion. China also continues to buy oil from Iran despite American sanctions. The exact figures are not known, but reports suggest it's been at record levels in the past few months. Remember, Iran accounts for roughly 24% of the oil reserves in West Asia. And China needs this oil to drive its economy. Around half of China's crude oil imports are from West Asia. In 2021, Beijing imported nearly 81 million metric tons of crude oil from the region. So alignment with Iran is a strategic decision. China is pushing to include Iran in the BRICS grouping. Currently, it has Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, that is BRICS, BRICS. Both Russia and China now want Iran to join. What does that mean for the US? Not good news. Chinese money flowing into Iran means Tehran gets the revenue it wants desperately. It weakens the impact of American sanctions, and the US says this money will fund Iran's nuclear program. But what's in it for Beijing? More oil, for sure, and more influence in the region. China has been working on it, which explains the China-Arab summit last year. Xi Jinping flew all the way to Riyadh to meet with top leaders of the Arab world. Together, they vowed to strengthen ties. Of course, the Saudis are on the other side of the power divide in West Asia. They're not friends with Iran, but China is working with them too. Reports say China signed 34 new investment agreements worth $50 billion with Saudi Arabia. This also shows China's growing footprint and America's waning influence in the region. As for India, it has been deepening its ties with its West Asian partners. Until recently, Iran was a key supplier of oil to India. It supplied around 10% of India's oil needs. That's before the American sanctions came in. India also invested around $85 million in developing the first phase of the Chabahar port. And this port is very crucial. It will give India direct access to Central Asia. It will help India circumvent Pakistan, the Chabahar port. Now, with China's entry, India will have to be watchful. Also ensure that this project, Chabahar, is completed on time. As for Tehran, it wants to balance ties. Reports say it also offered a China-style strategic deal to India last year. That deal focuses on attracting Indian investments. It is reportedly under consideration. So long story short, Raisi's visit to China has wider implications. This is much more than a regular diplomatic visit. It's about who holds a strategic edge over the other and what that means for existing players. Now let's talk about work life. How's it going for you? 3 years into the pandemic, companies are calling their staff back, and we understand you might be unhappy about the commute or about the inability to attend meetings in pajamas. But returning to pre-pandemic work life, one tired yawn at a time, has become the reality. Businesses are doing everything to lure people back to office. It's understandable that this shift comes as a rude shock to so many, especially as return to pre-pandemic work schedule seems like a lost cause. But this shift is a source of pure joy to some. Probably your bosses, but mainly your government. Why? Because this return to work from office is reviving the economy. Cities are bustling with office workers again, at least a few days a week to start with. Love it or hate it, commuting is good for the economy, and local businesses are seeing a throng of customers. The cost of remote work goes much beyond what meets the eye. Think about how your expenditure reduced while you were working from home. Maybe you reduced meeting your work friends for a drink, or stopped grabbing that coffee from your favorite joint before work. The lack of these simple actions not only affects you directly, but also the economy. Remote work has tangible economic costs. Case in point, New York, one of the world's leading financial centers. The economic cost of remote work is more pronounced here than anywhere else in the US. Its in-person work week has shrunk to 3 days. People go to office 3 days a week. Manhattan workers are spending 30% fewer days in office and spending more than $12 billion less every year due to this. $12 billion less. How did it hit such a grand number? Let me break it down for you. An average worker spends more than $4,500 a year on simple things like meals and shopping near their offices. $4,500 per year. This figure is for New York. Other cities are not too far behind. In San Francisco, an average office goer spends about $3,000. In Chicago, $2,300. When you work from home, you don't spend this money, or you spend less, which means missed sales for local businesses. And they are the drivers of a city's economy. Then you have the real estate market, the transit system. You need less office space, you spend less on commute, tax revenue takes a hit. This impacts the government's income. With less money, how will the government maintain infrastructure, parks, subways, schools, all other essential facilities? How will they keep your city safe and clean? It's a real head scratcher. No wonder so many are pushing for an end to remote work. But it's not going to happen overnight. This year, only 6% of Londoners are expected to be in office 5 days a week. Only 6%. In Tokyo, about 14% of job postings were for remote work in 2022. In 2019, this was just 3%. What about India? In India, about 46% of the organizations are pushing employees to attend office full-time. 46%, 32% are offering the hybrid model. Moral of the story? Work from home may not be working for your city. The economic cost is just becoming clearer. So maybe it's time to get back to your office desk, or think about it at the very least. Embrace the banter, gossip, and your manager's bad jokes that come with it. Think of this as your contribution to the economy. Let us know what you think. Write to us.